On April 25, 2026, the night sky over the Zagros Mountains was torn open. A sudden artillery barrage marked a turning point, signaling a violent shift from tension to active war. Hours earlier, military monitors were tracking routine patrols. By morning, mechanized units were pushing deep into the interior at a speed that left local defense systems struggling to track the movement. This rapid movement created a dangerous friction. The offensive was traveling faster than the physical roads could support, and much faster than any diplomatic channel could keep up with. In military terms, this is kinetic overreach, when the momentum of a strike physically outruns its own support system. To understand why this crisis didn't result in a quick victory, we have to track two colliding tracks: the physical breakdown of movement on the ground and the frantic scramble for a solution at the negotiating table. The battle had become a race. Success now depended on whether diplomatic intervention could reach a breakthrough before the supply lines stopped moving entirely. The first obstacle for the advancing ground forces wasn't an opposing army, but the earth itself. The high-altitude, rugged topography of the Iranian theater creates natural barriers that dictate how and where an army can move. This map shows the primary supply routes. Solid green lines representing stable lowland movement turn into jagged red lines in the mountains. As advances outpaced fuel trucks, lead vehicles stalled. This chain reaction turned vital national highways into dead gray zones. Without any fuel to move forward or space to retreat, the invading force loses its ability to react. An army built for speed is suddenly transformed into a collection of stationary targets. This paralysis didn't just affect the soldiers. Millions of local civilians were suddenly trapped in these same gridlock zones, unable to move as the fighting moved into their backyards. Desperate for resources, units began to seize local food and fuel supplies. This didn't just drain the towns, it dismantled the local infrastructure these people relied on for survival. When the fighting intensified around these stalled convoys, the neighborhoods became the front line. Civilians were caught in the direct crossfire, because the same stalled military vehicles that brought the war were now blocking their only escape routes. The humanitarian disaster was a direct result of the logistical failure. The inability to keep the army moving meant that the civilian population was forced to bear the weight of a stalled war. While the ground war sat in gridlock, the conflict moved into sterile, high-security rooms where international diplomats were attempting to find a way out. The talks were built on asymmetric de-escalation. Each side wanted the other to give up a specific advantage, one promising to pull back troops if the other promised to end the blockades that were strangling their economy. This graphic shows the disagreement. Faction A pushes for a rapid 5-day withdrawal, while Faction B demands a slower, phased timeline. As mountain chaos worsened, rising casualties and lost supplies forced both sides to constantly adjust their demands to match reality. The diplomats weren't working with a stable situation. They were trying to catch a falling object, attempting to freeze a collapse that was already in motion. By the end of April, the two tracks finally met. The sheer scale of the civilian toll created a level of international pressure that the negotiators could no longer ignore. On the ground, the reality was even more blunt. The logistical failure had become so complete it was physically impossible to continue the offensive. Both sides were forced to compromise because their armies were literally unable to move. This led to the finalized ceasefire agreement. It called for an immediate freeze of all unit positions and established humanitarian corridors to allow fuel and medicine to reach the trapped civilian and military zones. The agreement was fragile. Even as the ink dried, the gridlock in the mountains remained. Hostile units were still parked within sight of each other, waiting for the roads to clear. This crisis showed that a single breakdown in a supply chain can neutralize a modern army. It has forced regional powers to reconsider how they plan for conflict, proving that geography and logistics can be more decisive than the weapons themselves. Resolving a conflict like this requires more than just a signed paper. It requires an understanding that what happens at the negotiating table is always tied to the physical endurance of the people and the machines on the ground.